All right, welcome to Dr. Dan, the Cyber Guy. Today we're going to talk about what is cybersecurity. So, in the different slides and the different presentations that I'm going to be making, I thought it was pretty important to actually talk about what is cybersecurity before we even get into all of the different areas of cybersecurity to talk about. So, here we go. Little disclaimer before we get started. The information within this and the research conducted for this presentation is my own. It does not necessarily represent the information nor the opinions of any company or organization that I've worked for, I'm working with, or have worked with, or associated with. And the information should be used for general education purposes only. It's not considered a solution or a guarantee of any sort should you choose to implement some of the suggestions that I've discussed. Also, cybersecurity is an ever-changing landscape. This material may become obsolete and or out of date at some point. And oh yeah, reminder, my videos are very limited editing. So this is to make it feel like we are talking, having a presentation at work, so you never know what's going to pop up behind me. It could be my dog, it could be some kids. You just never know. So, a little introduction about myself before we get started. My name is Dr. Dan, the Cyber Guy. I have about 25 years of experience in IT, cybersecurity, risk, and auditing. I have worked for a handful of Fortune 100 companies as well as a lot of smaller companies. One of my passions is to help business folks and the average person have general understanding of cybersecurity. Most companies use the phrase cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility. While that's true, we typically only provide the annual compliance training or maybe two. Um, so I thought this is the solution to the problem. Quote of the day: if cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility, why aren't we teaching everyone about it? That's my quote. So let's get started. What is cybersecurity? Okay, cybersecurity is the art of protecting networks, devices, data from unauthorized access or criminal use, and practice of ensuring confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. It seems that everything relies on computers and the internet now. Communications like email, smartphones, and tablets, entertainment, video games, social media, and apps, transportation, navigation systems, shopping, um, using online shopping and credit cards, medicine, so like medical equipment and medical records, and the list just goes on and on and on. This was actually borrowed from CISA.gov. I'll have links to all of the references in the appendix. Um, so I want to talk about something, and I love that definition that they give. And the reason I love that definition is it encompasses so much. And just like cybersecurity does, cybersecurity is not just one little department or one little area that we need to focus on. It pretty much covers everything, and it covers everything in our daily lives. You see it on the news and everything. So it's pretty much all encompassing of anything that uses networks, devices, data, and things that are criminals are going after. So we're trying to protect those, all of those things. You'll notice that in that definition, they talked about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That's what we like to call the CIA triad. To be honest with you, the CIA triad's been around for, oh man, probably hundreds of years. There's really not a specific um, pinpointed time that we can talk about it. In fact, there's even discussions around some similar concepts all the way going back to Julius Caesar times. So there's no real creator. The one thing that we did see is in 1976, the U.S. Air Force actually documented and diagrammed it in one of their studies. So, I mean, we can go back to 1976, or we can talk about going all the way back to Julius Caesar. But confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We'll dive deep into that as we go through today. Identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Those are the NIST framework. That's the NIST framework for threat management. NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So NIST created this to talk about what do we do when it comes to a threat to our infrastructure, to our networks, our devices, our data, all of that fun stuff. So they put this framework together, and we'll go deep into that in later on in the presentation. So the whole idea behind cybersecurity, right, is to protect the crown jewels. So we look at the crown jewels over here, and we're protecting that. Just like in medieval times, they were protecting the crown jewels of the king and the queen, right? Um, and so what I like to do is I like to go and take a look at, and as you guys see all of my presentations, you'll notice that I like to go and start looking at how I can compare things to other things that you may be more familiar with, right? So I like to use, when I start talking about cybersecurity, and I'm introducing cybersecurity, I like to use the picture of a castle, and we'll go through and I'll share with you and make some comparisons with you about how the castle and our cybersecurity are very, very similar. So many castles, they only had one way into them, right? They had one path that gets to them. Consider that the way that you get into your network. Um, if it's from the outside, so it could be like a VPN, right? You VPN into your network. You're on your personal laptop or your company's laptop. You have a VPN connection. You can get into your network and you can access all of the files that you need to access. Or it could be something like a Citrix session, where Citrix basically has a virtual desktop, and basically that virtual desktop, that application that's on your machine, will connect into your server at your company, your Citrix server, and it will allow you to create that one solid, nice connection, right? So there is one path. There is one path to get into the castle right here, right? So then many of those castles had moats, right? So consider this like your firewall. It's blocking your way to get into the network. You have to be able to get into the gardens and the grounds of the castle, right? So there's that moat all the way around it. That's acting like your firewall. It's protecting the perimeter of your company, of your infrastructure, and all of that, right? Okay, so over the moat, we put a drawbridge. A lot of times they may have only had a regular bridge, but we're going to call this a draw, or we're going to use the drawbridge scenario this time, right? What they did and how that worked was they would go, "Hey, who are you? I see you're trying to get over here. Who are you?" And you would say, "I'm Dan. I'm trying to get in." Well, they would confirm, look at their list and say, "Oh, yeah, Dan is good to go." So they would lower the drawbridge. That's just like gaining your access into the network, right? You're just getting your access into the network by providing your credentials. So that's just like your username and password, right? But what they did, they were thinking about multi-factor authentication back then, because they also have this gate or this big door that's right here on the other side of the drawbridge. So you've single factored, you got to the door. Now guess what? You have to provide the second factor of authentication to get into the castle grounds or the castle gardens. So what happens is, then they would go, "Okay, I trust that you are Dan. I'm letting you across to get into the thing. Now I'm going to ask for different identification." So a second form of identification. Consider that your multi-factor authentication. We do things like that. We do things like that on to get into our networks today, right? All right. So note that we have these tall, thick walls all the way around it, right? We have these tall, thick walls here. I like to think about that like my network security, because it's protecting. It's not only does it get me to the gardens, it protects me from those gardens. There's this one little hole there that's right here that's allowing us to get in. That's like our firewalls and our and what we're using to our authentication methods. So it could be our Active Directory or what have you. Okay, but our network security is protecting that the whole garden, right? And then you'll notice that all these little holes up here in the around the castle and in that thick wall. I like to look at this like our security operations team, our guards. So the guards are going to be our security operations team. They're sitting there and they're monitoring. They're looking at what's going on, right? The other thing that you're going to notice is that in any castle, you have security guards that are actually going around and looking at things randomly, right? While their people are walking around, they're kind of watching you saying, hey, what's going on with this guy? What's this guy doing? So our security operations team are kind of everywhere. They're doing a lot of monitoring. They're monitoring everything that's going on within the network, outside the network, and things coming into the network. Okay. So then after the visitor and they get into the grounds, they must be authorized in order to access different things within the castle. So they can get to the castle's front door. They may be able to walk right in because the door is open. It's been opened for them. Okay. But once they get in that door, consider all of the different rooms. Some of those rooms had the crown jewels. One of those rooms had the crown jewels in it. There may be other key important things within those other rooms. Think about those things like your databases and your applications, right? Some of those rooms may be wide open, like the bathroom. Okay, you can go to the bathroom. Now, not that they had bathrooms back then in the medieval times, but they did have washrooms and things of that sort, right? So, what you want to do is think about it like, okay, this one may not have a whole lot of sensitive data in it. So consider it like the bathroom. It's wide open. You can get into it. You know, you don't have to have a username and password. You don't have to have any other kind of credentials. You've already been authorized to get this far. You can get to that. You can get to that, right? Now consider something that may have the crown jewels in it, or something that may have additional expensive items or things that they want to protect. So what has to happen is you have to be authorized to get into that room. So you have to have the key. Or let's think about it. Let's move up to a modern castle. And when you got authenticated right here through your second factor authentication, they may get let's give you a badge, and you can actually badge into that room, and it says beep. Yep, he's allowed to go in there. She's allowed to go in there. However, there's going to be other rooms where you go beep and it's going to go beep, 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 beep. You can't get in. So it's all going to be around how you gain access. So in some cases, you may have a username and password to get into that application or that room where that sensitive data is or that sensitive information is. But with the other ones, you may not be authorized to it. And you may have to request, maybe have to go back to the security guys and say, hey, I need access to this room as well. Okay. So we could probably go on for days, right? I can probably continue to walk through this. We can talk about the tripping stairs. We can talk about all these different kinds of things. But I think those are some key things that that we wanted to talk about and compare, so that you could kind of get the idea of this security model that we're following actually goes all the way back to the medieval times. Oh, and one more thing that I was going to mention is in some of these rooms, you may have a fake crown jewels sitting in there, right? And there may be security guards kind of paying attention to that room, but we leave it wide open, or we leave it only the door shut without it being locked. Why would we? And they're fake. They're fake. Why would we leave that in there? Oh, we might leave that in there to sit and watch Dan as he walks around and sees if he tries to get into that room. He knows he doesn't have access to that room, but he sees that it's open. Oh, and there's the crown jewels. Let's go ahead and try to take those. And then what's going to happen? Security is going to go, ha, I caught you. So we would call that a honeypot. Is we want them to kind of go after it so that we can watch what they're doing. It's fake. If they did steal it, not going to be a big deal, but we're kind of using that to kind of catch the bad guys. All right, so now what I want to do, and look at this. This looks like a ton of stuff here, right? What I want to do is I want to talk about the different areas of cybersecurity. There's a ton of them here, but we'll go through them pretty quick, okay? I want you to think about these as like your knights in shining armor. All of these different areas are the different knights in shining armor. They're going to help protect the cybersecurity realm of our company, okay? So some of these teams are within the same departments. Some of them may be different departments. Not all companies are going to be set up the same. There may be all of these different teams. These may be all different teams in your company. They may not. They may actually be combined into some, but overall the information that they have and the things that they do, the activities that that's being done as part of these different areas of cybersecurity are being done by somebody theoretically in your company. Okay. If they're not, you probably have some issues. You probably have some gaps, some issues. Now, unless you have a company that doesn't have a lot of critical information, you may not need some of these things. All right, so let's talk through these real quick. I want to start over here with the Security Operations Center. The Security Operations Center is basically it are those security guards that I was talking about before. They're the ones that are constantly doing the monitoring, the review of the network logs. They're doing all this stuff. They're watching stuff come in. They're watching stuff go out. They're doing all of these things, and they react based on what's going on. So a lot of these teams up here on the top all report into or are part of the Security Operations Center in a lot of companies. So the red team, they actually go out and they are doing penetration testing. They're trying to get into the network. They're using known vulnerabilities, known potential risks within the organization, trying to get in and seeing if they can actually make it into the network. The blue team, they're using the stuff that they know to try to protect the network. So they're protecting themselves against the bad guy, or protecting the network against the bad guys that are trying to come in. The network security team, they're the ones that put the controls all around in the network in order to stop things from coming in and stop things from going out, like the firewalls, right? They may have a team that does nothing but manages firewalls, okay, within your company. Now, the application security team, what they do is they help build controls and test controls that are built into the applications, making sure that they've got the proper vulnerability patches, right? The proper patching that's being done. They want to make sure that they're running scans against those applications for known vulnerabilities. They want to make sure that there is the proper identity and access management done on the applications. Are we paying attention to how we gain access and authorization to the application and to the things within the application? So identity and access management team, I just mentioned them a few seconds ago. They manage all identity and access for the company. So it can be at the network and it can be at the application layer. So it's all going to be at different layers, but they manage the access, the identity of the individuals and the access for those individuals. The threat intelligence team, those guys, they pay attention to all of the different things going on in the world. They have all of these different bits of information that are coming into them to talk about and to learn about all of the different threats that are out there. Okay. And so what they do is they feed that information into the rest of the organization to make sure that we are appropriately assessing and appropriately looking for those potential threats to our organization. Incident response. If there is an incident that happens at your organization, they're the ones that are helping respond to it, whether it's within your organization itself or into a third party that is within the organization, or I mean that works with your organization. So data loss prevention. These guys are really very important. These guys are the ones that put tools out there to stop bad emails from coming in, right? Or information from leaving the organization. What they're responsible for is to look for any kind of data that is trying to get in or try to go out. Mostly it's to go out because they don't want it to be lost. They don't want it to walk out the door. So you kind of think about the greeters and stuff at Walmart. Part of their responsibility, right, is to make sure that you don't leave without having paid for the stuff that you're doing. Otherwise, they say hi and just kind of act like they're trying to be there to greet. But they also provide a loss prevention type of a role as well. Security architecture team. And when you're trying to build an application or you're trying to bring in an application from the outside, the security architecture team will take a look at that application and figure out, does it fall into what we're talking about and requiring from our policies and our standards? Does that application actually meet that? Or how do we build the controls around that application in order to meet our requirements? Okay. Then the logging and monitoring team. They're the ones like I was talking about before, and with the security guards. They're out there and they're logging things. They're grabbing logs. They're monitoring everything that's going on in these different logs to be able to identify what any potential threats that may have made it in, or sometimes insider threats, right? Somebody within the organization trying to get stuff out. So they're constantly doing the monitoring of that stuff. Governance, risk, and compliance is one of those areas that's really close to my heart because I've spent a lot of time in governance, risk, and compliance. And it can be sometimes called governance, risk, and control. It just depends on what organization that you're in. But governance, risk, and compliance, or GRC, it's really around the assessments that are being done. It's really around the different compliance activities that are being done, making sure that you're complying, that risk is identified, and making sure that you're complying with all of the things that you need to comply with, whether it's regulatory, audit, internal policies, what have you. We want to make sure that we're following all of the things that we're responsible for and that we're making sure that we're meeting the compliance of. Now, the risk, we want to identify any kind of risks to our data. So using the information from the threat intelligence team or from the application security team and the network security team and the red team and the blue team and all of those guys, we want to make sure that we're assessing those areas to make sure that all of those guys are having a lot less work to do because we have identified the risks and we're building controls to mitigate those risks. So now we're getting into an area that is kind of a little bit like, you're like, Dan, are they really part of cybersecurity? Yeah. So we have a legal presence. So there's a cyber legal department in some cases. It may just be one or two people. Others, we may outsource it, but we have a legal department. We also have an audit and regulatory department. So it could be auditors, it could be regulatory assessors that are constantly looking and making sure that we are meeting compliance with our requirements. So you're like, hey, Dan, isn't that the same as governance, risk, and compliance? Yes, they're different levels. And they also a lot of times will make sure that the governance, risk, and compliance team are doing what they're supposed to be doing too. So it's different levels of security, right? And then we go into communication and administration. Like, wow, now we're really branching out there, Dan. We have a communications team that does nothing but cybersecurity communications. That's if we have an incident. They know what to say, what and when to say it, and how to say it. They work with our legal teams to figure out what needs to be communicated to whom and when. Same with the administration teams. There's a lot of administration that goes on in the background. We have finance people, we have admins, we have all different kinds of things that need to be done, learning and development, right? We have all these different administrative functions that need to be done in cybersecurity as well. And then project management. We have project managers that work on all different kinds of cybersecurity projects. So now let's move on to the next one. So CIA triad. We talked about this a little bit ago. The CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The CIA triad, it's old. It goes back many, many years. We must protect the confidentiality of the data that we are storing so that we can keep our customers' trust. We got to make sure that we're keeping that stuff confidential. Integrity. We must protect the integrity of the data so that we can rely on it. If that data is not being, if we cannot rely on the integrity of the data, you can't really rely on the data. The data's not good. You can't rely on it. You can't go and report on it. You can't do things with it. So we've got to make sure that we're protecting the integrity of the data. And then we're protecting the availability of the data. So we must make sure that it's available when we need it, that we can get to it when we need it. So talk about the NIST framework real quick. The NIST framework's been created for threat management, right? We go over this in a lot more detail in our incident response video. You'll see that coming up in probably the next few months. But in general, what's important to know is that in cyber, if we have a threat, we need to do the following. We need to identify what those threats are. What are the threats that are most likely to hit our organization? We need to protect ourselves against those threats. These are the controls that you see that the information security teams are putting in place. Many times they seem to annoy us, right? They're putting all these different controls in place. That's what a lot of this stuff is. Detect. We have to detect those threats. Should they attempt to get in? Or even worse, if they do get in, we got to be able to detect that. And then respond. We need to respond to whatever has been identified and figure out what we need to do to get rid of that threat. And then finally, recover. We need to do whatever we need to do to recover back to our normal business operations, right? So another thing that we want to do is after we recover, even though this is not on here and it'll be covered later on in another model that we talk about, is that we need to do a review and discuss whatever happened, what went right, what went wrong. What can we do in order to be able to make those other parts of that framework get stronger, get better, get more effective, get more efficient? Cybersecurity is all about protecting the network devices, data, and people within our companies and our homes. We do this through the use of people, processes, and different technologies. We talked about the CIA triad, the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability, all the things that we need to protect. We talked about the NIST framework, which we'll go into a lot deeper in a future presentation. But the NIST framework talks about identifying, protecting, detecting, responding, and recovering from any sort of threat. And then we talked about the crown jewels, protecting those, to put the controls in place that make sense for the information that we're trying to protect. Okay? And then finally, we also talked about the different areas of cybersecurity. I wanted to make sure that we included a lot of the different. Now, granted, that's not every area of cybersecurity. There are probably, depending on your organization, there could be tons more. But those are the high level areas of cybersecurity. All of them working together help make an organization strong and secure. So here are the resources. If you want copies of the slide, please email the slides. Please email me. That way I can kind of understand what you're planning on doing with the slides and things of that sort. I don't mind sharing, but I want to make sure that the proper resources and references are all made and all of that fun stuff. And again, thank you. And if you'd like me to join you or your organization, school, work, or church, just shoot me an email and we'll see what we can do. Dr. Dan Cyber at gmail.com. Thanks.